Hey there, Transcendia team. We've had a great couple of weeks. We're making a lot of progress, and I can see that we're going to accelerate as we continue week to week and focus on prospecting. I've put together a prospecting workbook or handbook, and you probably didn't even realize, but you are a co-author in this. I'm really appreciate you all taking the time to quickly share with me the approach you take to lead generation, qualification, and what your first contact looks like. I've taken some of that information and combined it with some of the tools and resources I have working with a lot of different companies and put together this workbook that we can continue to build, make better, so we can grow the pipe from 40 to 50 million and continue to grow that even faster. And most importantly, help you make even more money. All right. So what's in this book? And this is what we've started with. First of all, I've captured some of the resources that we've already talked about in terms of lead sources, how we're building our pipeline at the top of that funnel. In addition to that, I have something on LinkedIn because that is a crucial tool. This is a tool that we should be leveraging. If we're doing it right now, great. How can we do it better? If it's something we really haven't dove into, well, now's the time. Then I go into qualifying. We talked about this subject last week. And if we can qualify quicker and understand what good customers look like, we'll spend more time there and less time on customers that may not fit us, our business model, or just might be more difficult to work with. After that, I'm going to share with you the initial draft of what I call a prospecting template. I love these things because they help my A version come out. It just helps me do the right thing. So I'll share more on that. And then, of course, we jump into that initial contact. I've taken some of your examples. I've made some adjustments and added some things in based on my experience. And you will see some examples of an initial phone call, the voicemail, and the email. And then at the end of the document, you will see a document that says phrases that sell. These are quick little phrases that you might be able to use as you're communicating either through the phone, voicemail, or email, but sometimes a phrase can just make a difference in getting people engaged. So this has a lot of information in it. Watch it at your leisure, but at the end, we're going to ask you on the Google form to complete some exercises, actually putting this into practice on 1, 2, or maybe 3 of your current leads. And then we can share that with each other on our phone call, continue to collect good ideas, and I'll take that information, I'll put it into this workbook, and this is going to be a great tool that we can use moving forward. So what do you say? You want to get started? We talked about this when we launched the program. For our pipe to get full so we have more opportunities, it starts at the top. And that's where we do lead generation. It should be a consistent thing that we're doing. So many of you shared how you time block. So can you put a short time block? It might only be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, right? Where you take some time dedicated specifically to put some leads at the top of that funnel. I've captured some of the things that we've talked about, everything from using LinkedIn and LinkedIn Navigator, Reference USA, Google, etc. There's some ideas here. Use the workbook to trigger those ideas, remind you of some of the things you're doing, but it does require that we dedicate some time towards adding leads to our pipe. How does that get done? Probably not by taking the approach of, hey, I'll do it when I have a chance, right? When are you going to dedicate some time on your calendar? Is it going to be once a week, twice a week, bigger blocks, shorter blocks? I don't know. It's up to you. But I know in order for this habit and discipline to happen, we've got to make sure time is on our calendar. So let's continue to grow our pipe, talk about this, and we'll be asking you in the Google form to share what you've done this week to add more leads and what resources you're using. And of course, we always look for ideas. So if you have any ideas or advice for the rest of the group, please be ready to share that. So let's move on. Many of you have talked about how you use LinkedIn for prospecting. And in addition to that, just relationships with your existing customers. Many of you have been using it pretty extensively, and others, well, you've got some work to do. But wherever you are, start there and just begin to make it even better. LinkedIn is a very powerful tool for prospecting. It's a professional network, and it's a great way to market both proactively, but also passively. And if you build a great LinkedIn profile that really represents you and what you do well, when people are searching on LinkedIn or the web and their connections, your name is going to come up. And we want to make sure that profile gets engagement quickly. These are a couple of examples of things that you can do. So number one, make sure your profile is rock solid. A great way to do that, look at number one, some of your colleagues. You can grab some ideas there. By the way, we encourage plagiarism. This is not Harvard University. Don't do it over there. Here, if you see a good idea, we encourage people to do it. Obviously, you got to make it personal, right? So make it authentic. So just use those ideas. And if it's something that's transferable from one person to another, certainly grab it. I know myself and my colleagues, that's something we do. Why reinvent the wheel? Some of the things like people have uploaded the sell sheets, so they're right there. That might catch a client or potential client's attention. So, maybe it's late at night. They're on the couch working. You've done that before, right? And they come across your profile, right? They're killing some time. They click on it. Oh, I know someone here, right? Next is continue to grow that network. How many people are in your network? Is it 500, 1,000? How can you get it up a little bit? If it's only 100, maybe you're below 100. You're like, gosh, I got to get on the horse here. The good news is, once again, short time blocks. And I like to schedule time when I know I'm low energy, right? But I want to get some kind of production out of myself. So schedule 10, 15 minutes during the day, and maybe just for the next week, where you're going to say, hey, I'm going to spend 15 minutes on LinkedIn, and that 15 minutes is going to be dedicated to growing my network. So go through, click on people and connect to them. One of the things I've found that is really the best way to connect with people is don't surprise them. Just don't massively connect to people. Add a note. And I gave you a couple of examples here in the workbook, but remind them how you know them, or to ask them why, or tell them why you're connecting to them. Don't just go blind into it. And that way you're more likely to get more acceptances. And guess what? The larger your network grows, the quicker it grows. So it becomes like this. Once the ball starts rolling, man, it starts rolling. And once we have a bigger network, this also helps us when we're prospecting, because we can find more people in some of our prospective accounts, and we'll be able to gather information which we can use on that initial call, especially, right, to demonstrate we're doing our homework. Then lastly, I just want to touch on LinkedIn Navigator. Many of you are using this tool, but this is a great tool where you can further filter out searches, and it also ties into Salesforce. Now, that might require some time, but that time is likely well worth it. This is not a training course on how to do all that stuff, but if that's something you want to do, once again, I know you're smart enough. If you dedicate a little time, you can reach out to the right people, maybe some of your colleagues that are on our calls, and ask them. You can do it. So what are you going to do to build or on your LinkedIn network, build on your profile? What are you going to do to make this just a little bit better? Have you ever gotten a new car and all of a sudden you're driving around, you just see, my gosh, I had no idea everyone had this car. It seems to show up even more. You're like, I never noticed that before. Well, when we can define what a good client looks like, then and have some clarity around that, where we know some of the factors and some of the characteristics that we're looking for, and sometimes what we don't want, right? In a way, it's kind of like choosing a partner or a spouse, right? You want to decide what you're looking for with as much clarity as possible, so that way when you see it, you can say, I'm adding that one to my list. I'm going to invest some time here to really work on this prospect. I'm sure you've all had the experience where you may have started a conversation with a potential client, and it isn't till a year later that you actually do some business, sometimes longer, but sometimes those ones that take a while are our best customers. And sometimes the ones that come easy, well, they're the other one, right? But it starts with just slowing down and thinking about, what does my ideal customer look like? So you can use this exercise and just think about it. What are some absolutes that a customer must have for me and Transcendia to do business with us? What are some things that just would be a total deal breaker? And we talked about some of these things on our call. So I left you a grid here to just think about that. And then when we get on the call, we can share those ideas. Now, down below are desirables, okay? Doesn't mean they have to have these things, but boy, it's nice if they do. And then the other things, what are some other things you're looking for? Now, this is extremely helpful in terms of time management, because sometimes we start researching and we get the job done, but how can we research more effectively and use our time? So how can we, instead of taking 10 minutes to research a website and LinkedIn and other resources, how can we do that in 5 or 3, right? One way we can do that is by having some clarity on what we're looking for. So we're not just meandering about looking at a company website. What pages do you go to? What are you looking for on those pages? What are some important information you want to pick up when you're on LinkedIn with them? Like for me, I want to find people I have in common or anything I have in common. Maybe it's a sports team. Maybe it's someone they follow on LinkedIn. All of this stuff is super useful as you qualify, but number 2, you can use when you're making that initial contact through phone, voice, or email. So take a moment, do this, and let's talk about it on our call. I love things that make my life easier, right? I love things that trick me into top performing behavior. Well, one thing that I learned about and was introduced to many years ago were templates, different templates, whether it's a prospecting template like this one, or it might be a preparation template for presentations. It might be a preparation template for a sales call, but where I can just systematize what I do a little bit better. Based on our work together, I took a stab at this template, and I need your feedback. Does it make sense? What is it missing? What can we do to make it better? So on this page, what I'd like you to do is take a moment and take a look at it. And I'll also provide a link to a separate document with this template along with a blank one. You can download this, and when we get on the phone call, share your feedback. Is this useful? I like it because it hits the highlights of things that I should be thinking about. So obviously, what's the company? What's the contacts within the company that I know? Because often we may have multiple contacts, or maybe we have a main contact, but there's some other influencers. So we can capture that on a sheet of paper. And I'll go through some other things here, and I just want to be clear. It's not like every single lead you're going to use this. Sometimes you just keep it on your desk and glance at it, and it's going to help you identify, number 1, is it qualified? What do I know? And more importantly, what don't I know? So for example, problems we solve, value we bring, unique benefit we have. I've put some questions in the boxes down below, and we can make those better, I'm sure, as well. But hopefully this triggers some ideas. But when we think about a specific prospect and we can identify something of value to them, That's a problem we solve. How do we make their life easier, right? That's what they want. That's what keeps them up at night. But what's a benefit we can bring? Something that is strong enough where it's going to get them to move and go from the status quo, which is really a challenge. That's what great salespeople are all about. Again, equipment and products that they use. We should identify that. That's our job, to do that homework. And if we don't, sometimes we can use where we have gaps, we can ask these questions on the phone. But we want to be careful that we're not asking a potential client to do all their work for us. We want to demonstrate that we're the type of person they want to work with. And we do that by showing them we do our homework. And you know what? Most salespeople struggle with this, and I know I do too. I get lazy, right? I want them, hey, tell me about your business, or tell me about this, right? Now, we want to make sure we're delicate about that, because I could be, if I'm a prospect and you're calling me, I'm thinking, dude, I got to work here, right? So what we want to do is gather as much information that's public and then build on that information. That alone is going to reduce, bring their resistance down, and they're going to be way more receptive, because you're going to come across more professional, more prepared than anyone else, probably even their current supplier. So I have some other topics here. Take a look at it. I need your feedback. Let's make this better. Let's make this a tool that can help us all be a little bit better, kind of back to that, do more cuts and fewer loops so we can use our time effectively. So walks through equipment and products they use, what industry trends specifically in their industry. We can mark some things down. And the good news is, if we work in certain verticals, or whether it's printers or distributors, etc., you almost could do one for each specific vertical, and then build on it specifically for that company. But there's a lot of things that transfer across the board. So as we go through, we'll get this right, number one. Then we'll get some examples, and we can share that. We'll have everyone post them, so we can all look at each other's, or we'll highlight a few of these on our call. So in initial contact, you got to think about that. It's we get one chance to make a first impression. Let's just not call up and waste that. Let's make that a masterpiece. And then how are we going to close that or move wherever we are to the next step? And then the last thing, I think this one's really critical, to get people to move. There's sometimes things that happen. Well, let's take COVID, for example. That it changed the way people did business. Traditionally, we might be getting together in person, but we're doing this virtually because that's the only choice. The trigger was COVID. There's all kinds of triggers that happen. Companies go out of business, changes in the manufacturing process, changes in the supply chain, and the turnaround times. All those triggers can be opportunities to get a client to move. What are they? Let's be aware of them. And we want to identify, how can we kind of move them? What's the stalemate? And if we just slow down and think about some of this stuff, chances are you'll come up with a better solution. This is also a great tool that you can use in your cadence meeting. So if you're working on some specific prospects, bring it to the cadence meeting, share it with your GM, and you know what? Two heads are better than one. And on the cadence calls, sometimes there's 5, right? There's a lot of brain power there. So this is a great tool that can kind of focus that energy, and also focus on things that can get that client to see that Transcendia is their best partner. Okay, we've done our preparation, we've done our research, we've qualified, we've decided that this lead is worth our investment of time. So we're gonna pick up the phone and call them. Now, there are a few different approaches to prospecting. You can do an email, a call and an email. You can do a call, then email, whatever your choice is, or maybe you're going to vary this to see that what works out best. But one thing I've learned with telephone prospecting or email prospecting is it's really part art and part science. There's so many factors going on with them that we don't know about. And then there's also some factors going on with us. And then finally, when we bring those together, there's not going to be a perfect scientific way to do this. At the same time, there are some key things that we can do that can give us a better shot. Now, I've done thousands of prospecting programs. In addition to that, I've done thousands of hours of prospecting myself. To build my own business, I've had to do this. So I truly eat my own cooking. And I am humbled every time I do it, because you and I know it's not like you have 10 leads and you talk to 9 people. It requires a lot of energy, effort, and it can be overwhelming at times. It's like, especially when you fall into a slump. So how do we get out of a slump? We just focus on the next one. Just pick up the phone, look for a new one, just keep going, because there's a piece of gold in there. That's what prospecting is all about, right? Finding the gold is in the most successful people are the ones who just persevere and say, I am going to do this, right? And if you keep going, you haven't failed if you haven't stopped, okay? So I want to start off with something I call the 3 Ps. This is a communication technique. And this is one of those things where, you might be doing this unconsciously. And I find myself falling into some of these traps. But when you're prospecting, obviously you don't have the human interaction in between, physically, and especially these days with COVID. So we have our voice, right? And the words we use. So we want to be super thoughtful about that. What's going to get the best results? Sometimes we use phrases that immediately kind of knock us out of the game. And so I've identified some best practices that you might want to incorporate. And again, it's part art, part science, right? There's some things I feel very strongly about. And I believe, because I've seen it proven, especially when I work in bigger call centers when they're doing a massive amount of outbound calls, I've had a chance to test some of these techniques. So that's why I'm so passionate and really adamant about using them. So let me go through a couple of those fundamentals. Then we have some examples here. And then, of course, the best one's going to be the one that you develop for your call. And we'll have a chance on our calls to talk about them. So what are the 3 Ps? They are pace, pause, and punch. Okay. So when you're speaking on the telephone, step number 1 is to be very thoughtful about your pace. What should it be? What happens if a person is speaking really fast, right? They can come across like they're selling something, right? Fast talker. Oh, they're selling me something. And what happens when we're prospecting, sometimes we're a little anxious or, maybe even a little nervous, right? And we're like not sure what we're going to get. By the way, I've been doing these programs for 20 years, not one fatality in prospecting. We have a perfect record of safety, okay? So there's been none, all right? So good news there. Don't worry about it, right? Just pick up the phone and call. But start by deep breath and go at a slower, more deliberate pace. In fact, when I coach people, I coach them to practice slower, almost to a point where someone's going to say, hey, what's up? Are you on some medication or what's going on, right? But when we actually get a person on the phone, we'll naturally pick up our pace. Most people speak too quickly, especially that first 10 to 20 seconds. For example, hey, good morning. This is Bob with Transcendia calling for Tom, please, right? They just picked up the phone and they're wondering, whoa, slow down, Seabiscuit, right? And you'll get them. They'll start taking control of the call immediately. Hey, who was calling again? Now, when they start asking questions, they just took control. So it's really critical, our opening line, that we're slow and deliberate. We want to make sure they get our name and who we're calling from. Because if they don't, they're going to ask about it. So we want it so crystal clear. Now, if you're getting this right, is when the client doesn't ask you or the prospect doesn't ask you, what was your name again? So Go at it at a slow pace. It might sound something like this. Hey, good morning. This is Bob with Transcendia calling for Tom, please. And a couple things I did there. I incorporated some pauses in between words, like before my name. That way my name comes across clearly. I don't know what it is, but people, if I talk too quickly, they'll call me Paul. Where do they get that? I don't know, but that's what they hear, right? Has that happened to you? It's probably because we're maybe not as clear as we'd like to be. So putting a pause before your name really helps. So good morning, my name is Bob. Now, you're hearing it here, but on the telephone, it just comes across more clear. Another great area or spot for a pause is before Transcendia and really enunciate your company name. So that way they get it clearly. Again, Transcendia. If they don't get it, they're going to ask, right? And they've just taken control. Hey, good morning. My name is Bob with Transcendia, calling for Tom, please. And notice my downward please, right? It's not like please, right? It's more of an assumptive please. Like if I'm calling and trying to get, this is relevant, most relevant for a gatekeeper, right? Because it helps you get through the gatekeeper. You come across more confident and like you know who you're talking for, and they're like, oh, okay, let me get you through. Now, if you get the person on the phone, fantastic. They know your name and they know who you're calling from. And then that allows us to go to step 2, which is that initial benefit or problem statement with a hook on it. And that hook is in the form of a question. So if you look here, the problem benefit statement, I tried to put together a few examples. I need your help. Wordsmith these. I know your business enough to be dangerous, but not enough to really get it 100% right. So if you can help by creating some opening statements, and then I'll continue to work together with all of us, and then we'll capture those and we'll put this in the document. So we don't have to always recreate the wheel. We'll have a handbook we can go to and grab these ideas. So again, being your, if you will, ghostwriter, and you're my co-author here, I'd like you to take these ideas and make them better. But here's an example. Hi, I know you're busy, so I'll be brief. I noticed you're using this equipment and that you do a lot of work in the blank industry. I'm curious, how long have you been using blank equipment? Now, obviously you can make that better. Let me point out another phrase in here that I have found to have unbelievable effectiveness. And that is, hey, I know you're busy, so I'll be brief. And you're saying, well, what's the big deal here, right? What if I'm not brief? Don't worry about it, right? What you want to avoid saying is, hi, this is Bob with Transcendia. Do you have a few minutes? If you do that, you've given them an out, right? You know what? I'm really busy. They, of course, going to say that. Who's not going to say they're busy? I've got a 12-year-old daughter who's out on summer vacation. She's busy. Everyone's busy. So you acknowledge it up front. You've taken that away from the prospect, right? And not in a bad way, right? Hey, I know you're busy, so I'll be brief. That is amazing because they just seem to get a little more comfortable, like, okay, they're going to be brief. The other thing I want you to think about is voicemail or caller ID, right? Who doesn't have it these days? If you don't have it, you know, you probably still have a rotary phone. Everybody has voicemail. And you know what, as a salesperson and caller ID is our best friend. It really is. And this is the way I've found to look at it. When they have caller ID, they know it's you calling, right? So if they pick it up, if they pick up the phone, that's a huge buying signal, And they're also saying, hey, I might have a minute of time, right? Are you going to pick up, let's take our Monday calls. You're in the middle of that. Tom's on it. Everyone's on this call. You get a phone call on your cell and you see who's on the screen there. Are you going to pick it up if it's someone you don't have a relationship with yet, or maybe you recognize the name, but would you pick that up in the middle of a meeting? Of course you wouldn't. And your prospects aren't either. So remember, when they pick up the phone, that is really a win. It's a huge win. And so when they pick it up, we want to make sure we are on our absolute A game. That's why it's so critical to think and even write out what is your opening statement, because this is where they begin saying, do I want to spend a minute with you, or am I going to try to get you off the phone as quickly as possible? At the beginning of a call, it's about 90-10. 90%, okay, how can I get them off the phone? Even though they willingly picked it up, right? How do I get them off the phone, right? But in our opening statement, we want to begin as quickly as possible to hopefully get that to 50-50, like, might be worth a couple of minutes of my time, right? And sometimes if we have such a strong opening and we meet them at the right time, then man, that can flip. Maybe it goes, 10-90 the other way, right? But what I've found is you're not going to get as far if you don't have a thoughtful, good opening line with that initial hook. So there's some examples here. You want to point out problems you solve, because that's what they're interested in, or value you bring, not just general value. You want to talk so specifically that when they hear your opening line, it demonstrates you've done your homework, that you know them in the business, taking the general stuff we have and making it more specific. It's just that more of that cut and loop. And when we do that, we'll find when they do pick up the phone, we'll get even better engagement. Sound pretty good? So work on your opening lines, and we're going to ask you to share one of them in the Google form. Again, we'll begin to collect this, wordsmith it together, and I'm excited about the next few weeks on that. Now, the next thing is, I call them must-react questions. In sales, so often people ask lazy questions or throwaway questions. We want to make sure we're having a conversation here. And the best way to get prospects talking is to ask questions that they can't help but want to answer. I mean, it's like you ask it, their mouth starts speaking before they can't even, they're like, what's happening here? When we ask questions that are too difficult to answer, or the prospect's going to be guarded about early on, we're going to shut things down. So we want to be thoughtful immediately to ask some questions that's going to get them talking. So I'd avoid questions like, hey, so how much volume are you doing right now, and what are you paying? That might be a good question, but not quite yet, right? Who are you using right now, and why are you using them? Oh, that's a little bit, going to cause some defensiveness, right? So be thoughtful. So I've given you a couple of examples here, and just a reminder, it should be open-ended, right? So using the words, hey, what, how, when, why, right? So, hey, what are you doing in this situation? Or how have you handled getting product, when the supply chain's been broken from China? So some of that stuff where they'd have an opinion on it. And then if you've even customized this further, you've done some research on LinkedIn, you can incorporate a rapport building question. Hey, Tom, I see that you're originally from Chicago. How long have you been down in Florida? So that little thing must react. It's not, and what has that done? It's demonstrated I've done a little bit of research. My credibility begins to climb. Hey, I'm dealing with someone who's not going to waste my time, that they've done their work. And when you ask questions like that are thoughtful at the right time, you're going to start having more success. All right, so let's wrap up the call. We've gotten this far, right? So they've actually talked to us. They've warmed up. We want to have a way out. Some calls, they're really quick. We caught them, they picked up. We want to create a good impression. At the end of this call, they should always feel better about us and Transcendia. We do not ever want to come across as offensive or pushy, okay? It is not an old school pound the phones, pound them over the head. We will live to fight another day. So be careful we don't try to overstep or overstay our welcome, okay? That doesn't mean we don't ask some questions and push it just a little bit, okay? But I don't know about you. I've done it a few times. You know when you've overstayed your welcome. Steve, you know that. I know you're familiar with that. But so we want to be always have a way out, okay? How can we step out? And the way I look at this is always have 3 ways out: easy, moderate, and aggressive. So if the call is good, right, but we're not making much traction, maybe no immediate opportunity with the account, an easy way out is where you promise to do something. Maybe it's send them an email. Maybe it's send them whatever it is, something easy. Oh, hey, listen, I'll wait a month or so once you get through this, and I'll give you a call back. Does that sound okay? Yes. Now, an easy one is it puts the requirement on you and nothing on them. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right? But what I challenge people to do here, what I found effective, is make a small promise and keep it. It's a way to begin to build trust with a prospect. When you make a promise and keep it, that can have a huge impact on their receptivity. So be thoughtful. Maybe you can think about some promises you can make. With some clients, it's simple little things. And when you say you're going to send an email and you send it quickly, that has an impression. Maybe you're going to send a sample. Maybe you're going to, send them a connection you have in common. Whatever it is, try to look for things where you can make a promise and keep it. And that's the easy one. Moderate is where there's something for both of you to do. You do something, but you're asking the prospect to do something. And in this case, the degree of difficulty should be relatively easy. Make it easy for them to do that to you. Hey, Steve, would you go ahead and send me this link? Or can you go ahead and send me this? Or I'm going to send you my contact information. Would you mind just responding to make sure you got everything? So, or hey, Steve, would you mind after you get this email with that sell sheet?
Call from 19.
So that moderate one is something for you and them to do. And again, with the emphasis, making it really easy for them to do. But again, that will show engagement. And then lastly is aggressive. Man, this is one of those calls where it's like you called at the right time. Literally, one of our children could probably make the call and get the sale here. But you just struck gold. You hit a person at the right time. Maybe they're frustrated with their current supplier. Maybe they can't get the product they need. Maybe they're new to their position. Whatever it is, it's like, oh my gosh, it just seems magical. And in this case, you want to, number one, you may just continue the conversation right then and there because they're interested. Or number two, you make sure before you get off that call, you dedicate, okay, and get time on the calendar. You might say something like, hey, Glenn, do you have your calendar handy? Let's look at Tuesday. I got 9 o'clock open, or would the afternoon be better? So get them to their calendar and get it locked in, because we know, hey, I'll send you some update times or what have you, right? It gets lost in the email. When you have a live person and things are going well, I like the line, hey, Steve, do you have your calendar handy? Take a look at Tuesday. I've got this open or that open. Once they're there, no, I'm out all day Tuesday, but Wednesday I've got time, right? So you want to make sure you're ready for any one of these. And again, this template is a great way to be ready. And a lot of times you can use the same strategies on, each call. You'd be ready with that one when you get someone that's really hot. Now, just to tie in Salesforce here. So whenever I've done a phone call, it's in that moment I plan my next one, or I plan my next contact. So if you do phone call, email, then I'm going to go to the next step and actually maybe send that email immediately. If I'm going to call them back, at that moment, I'm going to decide when, okay? And then I'm also going to tell myself what I'm going to say in that future call. So it's fresh in your mind. Open up Salesforce, set up the next planned contact, and what the purpose and what you'll speak about then is. We'll be talking about follow-ups like this because chances are we're not going to talk to people on that first call, but a few will get through. But just to kind of bring Salesforce into this is going to help you make sure you consistently drip on or water those leads and ideally get them to contacts and eventually to prospects. So how do you like this template? Pretty cool, huh? How can we make it better? What is it missing? And what can you add? Okay. So let's move on to the voicemail. Voicemail. Chances are you get a lot of this. In my experience, whether it's B2C or B2B, about 20% is a pretty good contact ratio. What I mean by contact ratio is you actually talk to the human being that you're seeking to speak with. So if you're at 20%, you're doing pretty good. So set your expectations. Realize, sometimes we have this vision that, we're going to talk to a ton of people. If you're talking to more than 20%, great, but don't be discouraged if you're not. So if you take those percentages, right? If you make 10 phone calls, you'll talk to 2 people, right? That means you're more than likely leaving 8 voicemails. So with that in mind, we want to make sure we have got an Academy Award winning voicemail. We know we're going to have to leave a lot of them. It's also a great way to practice our value props and some of the things we're saying are in our initial call. So if you're leaving one voicemail after another, then you get the person on the phone. Those voicemails are a great way to warm up for the live one. I'm a big fan of blocking time to make calls, not making one, and then leave a voicemail, doing some research, making another one. Block up and say, you know what, I'm going to make 10 calls on Tuesday morning. I'm going to make 10 calls on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And bunch those calls up, and you can just go into Salesforce if you've got everything lined up there. So it should be at your fingertips. Do all the prep work beforehand. Do that during non-selling times, and then dedicate times. But be ready to leave an exceptional voicemail. A couple of reminders. I know we've been on the other side of voicemails frequently, right? And so often, you and I, we just delete them, right? It's like, I'm not interested, right? So we have to understand what's the purpose of our voicemail. And when we're prospecting, typically the purpose is to get some reaction or a call back. And then secondly, if we're not so motivating them to do that, is that we leave a good impression about who we are, that we get a touch on their radar. I'm sure you've heard this stat before. It takes six contacts before you really get some traction with a potential prospect. I've tried to do the research on that. I see various things on the internet there. I guess if you see it on the internet, it's true, right? But what we do know is salespeople who don't have persistence and they quit after 1 or 2 or 3 calls, they're missing a huge opportunity. So voicemails are a great way to stay on people's radar, and we just want to make sure our voicemail leaves them feeling positive about us, and riding that line of being persistent without being a pest. And often what I'll do is, if I feel like I'm being a pest, I'll just call myself out on it with the client. I might say, hey, the last thing I want to do is be a pest to you. So if for some reason I'm calling you too much, just let me know. I'll back off a bit. I do want to let you know that I'm excited about learning more about your company, because I think there's some really neat things going on right now that you'd like to hear about. Things like that. So here's a couple of things to keep in mind. Speak clearly and at a comfortable pace. Remember the 3 Ps. So pacing and pausing. If you're speaking too quickly, you in fact can frustrate the person who's getting the call, because they're like, I have to replay this, or what is this, right? It's a waste of time. And my recommendation, just don't leave it. Slow yourself down. Don't try to pack in too much. In fact, less is actually more. So remember the 3 Ps. Now, talking about less is more, I've heard the general rule of thumb, 30 seconds. If you have such a compelling offer, that it's just like overwhelming. Hey, we're giving out free product for the next year. If you give me a call back, I just need your address and where you'd like it shipped to. In fact, we can just ship it when you need it. Who's not going to call back to that? In fact, maybe you should just leave one of those. That'd be funny, right? Okay, all right, don't do that, right? But ideally, and you'll look at some of the scripts that I've put together for some voicemails here, about 20 seconds is probably more ideal. That's the attention span. People are going to listen to your message typically based on the first 5 to 7 seconds. So you got to make sure the remaining 7 to 14 seconds is just really useful, okay? Next, reminder, your objective is to get a response. You want to ideally get a call back. And the way you do that is just like with your initial openings, you want to create some curiosity, right? Curiosity is very powerful when it comes to sales. And I think of it like this. In sales, we're either trying to sell them something, but what's more effective is if we can create a buying conversation or buying feeling, and we do that through questions and through curiosity, because if we're constantly pitching, that often puts up a barrier between us and the client, the prospect. We want to look at asking questions, creating curiosity, building value through questions. And that's where we create a buying conversation versus a selling conversations. I'm sure you do it when you get a prospect engaged and you really develop an opportunity. Be careful we're not pitching, especially early on. That's going to turn people off. Now, your first voicemail should be exceptional. This is going to be your first impression. We want to make this remarkable. What's remarkable? Think about that. Remarkable is worth remarking. And I remember when I first started selling this business, it was back in 2000. And I was working with my mentor and the person I initially got into the business. He had been with Dale Carnegie, wrote their programs for about 18 years. And we put together a script and things like that. And I had a plastic table and he gave me some numbers and I just start pounding calls. And he was in the same room with me, small little company. And I'd leave a few voicemails and messages. And then he actually typed out a voicemail and he gave it to me. He says, hey, give this a try, right? So he let me go at it. So I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And I actually, after leaving so many voicemails, I felt like Brad Pitt here, right? I was delivering the Brad Pitt of voicemails, and it was fantastic. That was my first day. I got a call back at the end of the day. It was the guy at the San Diego Union Tribune. And you know what he said? He says, you know what? I get a lot of these calls because we do sales training and things like that. He says, I get a lot of these calls. I mean, I get 10 a week, right? He says, but your voicemail was one of the best I heard. I had to call back. So they work. And I was glad I learned that on my first day selling this business. So I've been more thoughtful about the voicemails I leave, especially that first one. Some other things, don't reference previous attempts. It kind of sounds desperate and salesy, right? Hey, I'm just following up. I just wanted to do this. When you add that word just, you're diminishing your message. And then the other thing is use the information you've gathered to make it personal, make it authentic. Don't sound like a robot. Now, I mentioned the word script, a good reminder here. Someone reminded me of this. I like movies, right? Guess what? These actors and actresses use script, but you wouldn't know it, right? So when we have a script, it's not that scripts sound like scripts. We sound like scripts. So we've got to be able to nail this so it's smooth and just be authentic. People are attracted to and really love to connect with people who are authentic. So the more you can personalize this, and it's like this voicemail was for me, it's going to generate more callbacks. So work on some voicemails, and it can start with just one. Think about one client or one lead, I should say, that you're prospecting. Be ready with that initial call that we just talked about. And then number two, be ready with your voicemail. Craft all of this. And when you do it for one, all the work you're doing here will be applicable to 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's the voicemail. Love to. And when we get on our call, we'll be asking you to share some example voicemails so we can get some ideas from one another. So here's a voicemail template and worksheet. I tried to craft a couple of examples. Hopefully it will trigger some ideas. I'm not saying they're perfect, but with some wordsmithing and you adding in your knowledge and expertise, I'm sure you'll be able to construct some great ones. And once you share those back with me, I'll incorporate them into this workbook, and I'll also try to add things to make them just a little bit better. So number one, it ties into that initial phone call. So you'll see, hey, good morning, Michael. I was doing some research and I noticed that you have this equipment and you offer plastic printing services. We have several products that are compatible, and more importantly, it's available when you need it. Hey, reach out to me and I can share some ways that we've been able to get our customers the product they need when they need it. This is Sean Graham with Transcendia, and you can reach me on my direct line, 555 555 1212. So, a couple things I want to highlight. Number one, the 3 Ps: pace, pause, punch. And then number two, another phrase that I've found is useful. Maybe this one's not earth-shattering, but a good habit. My direct line. People don't like phone trees. I kind of like them. On the weekends, I do that for fun. I'll just call airlines or cell phone companies, and I like to just see where that phone tree takes me. I'm just kidding, right? But just a subtle thing. Hey, my direct line is, it also cues them, if they're interested, to write down your phone number. Now, they might even have it on their machine, so that's fine too, but slow down, leave your number. Some people leave their number twice. I think that's fine too. I didn't put it in here. So that's number one. The other thing, just like with the initial contact, I was doing some research and I noticed this. You've demonstrated you've done some research, some homework, which should build your credibility. You base it on evidence because you talk about the equipment and the type of printing they promote. So Barry, I picked that up from your cue. Many of you shared that, but the research that you do and how you can open up that call. And then I'm not going to give them all the ideas, but I've thrown out a little bit of an appetizer here. Hey, you hungry for a little getting your products at the right time, at the right place? You're probably making a call here because chances are their supply chain might have been interrupted, or there might be an opportunity or a gap where their current supplier, maybe had a couple of hiccups, and I'd like to listen. Maybe, you know what? We haven't had a backup, but I realized through all this crazy time, it's really critical, which could be another approach. Another example here. Hey, Tom, I'm working with one of your counterparts over at Becton Dickinson, and we're helping them prepare for USP 661.1 compliance. Hey, this is Frank Rio with Transcendia. Reach out to me and I'd be happy to share with you some things we're doing. You can reach me on my direct line, etc. So when you look at this one, I don't want to tell them all the things I'm doing and how I'm helping clients be compliant. I want to let them know I am doing it. If they want the ideas, call me. If we give them everything up front, there's no reason to call us back. Again, I'm sure you can wordsmith this. Thank you, Frank, for your help in sharing some of the things you're doing, which are fantastic. Great material, Frank. So another example. Now, here's another one. Some people They're like, no way would I leave this. This simple mystery voicemail has been, it's just delivered incredible results. And I've had clients use it in several different industries, from selling insurance, financial services, selling car parts, selling milk. I mean, the mystery voicemail has been amazing. So it's not meant to be a sleazy tactic, but it is the ultimate in curiosity. And your intention is not bad. Your intention is good. You're calling to help them, right? But that curiosity might get them. And it just sounds something like this. You got to be careful you don't add extra things in there. Hi, Tom. This is Barry White with Transcendia. My direct line is 555 555 1212. Once again, Barry, this is Barry White with Transcendia, and my direct line is this. Thanks. And you hang up. Now they're thinking, did I know this person or what? What curiosity, right? Now that is curious. They'll call you back. Now, when you get a call back, these days, most of us are working in our office. So we have to be ready when we see our caller ID pop up. So we're ready to pivot into our conversation. If you have your prep template around and based on your experience, chances are you'll be able to have a good reaction. The other good news is when people call you back, they're calling back at a good time. They've chosen this time to call back. They don't go into a meeting and say, I'm going to make this return phone call. Hey, Barry, it's Tom over here at ABC Company. Hey, I can't talk right now. I'm in a meeting, but that's why I called. They're not going to call you. So when they do call you back, that's a huge buying signal. And it's generally a decent time where you know they're probably willing to invest at least 5 or maybe even 10 minutes in a conversation with you. So initial voicemail, really critical. Let's work on this. Fill out the Google form with your example for one lead that you're going to be calling. Let's talk about the initial contact in email. So whether it's phone or voicemail or email, a lot of the same ingredients go in here. There's a couple of tips that might help you craft these. Now, the good news is we're going to do a lot of heavy lifting initially on this, maybe refining what our initial opening is, maybe refining our voicemail and refining our emails. But once we get these things kind of locked down, then it's going to be easy for us to do a higher volume of prospecting because we'll be able to grab these templates and just reuse examples and quickly modify them and customize them. The bones of each one of these will be complete, and you just need to polish up the edges or quickly tailor them for that specific client. It's like buying a suit off the shelf. The majority of the work is done. It's now to tailor it to that specific client. And whether it's, the initial call or voicemail or email, that all goes hand in glove. So a couple of things to keep in mind with prospecting emails, and I've put them in here. Number one, just like our phone calls, keep it short. As a general guideline, the email should be able to be read in about 2 minutes. If it's too long, they're probably going to delete it relatively quickly. It's like overwhelming. It's like, I'm too busy for this, right? So when you look at it, and what I've done to test is literally, I put my timer on my phone and I read my email at a slow pace. If you can get it to a minute or 90 seconds, you know your message is going to get across. And you know what? It's harder to write a shorter email than it is longer. Sometimes I know I get a little bit lazy and I take the shotgun approach. I want to spray and pray. I want to send so much information or give them so many reasons why we're a great client vendor to work with that I'm like, something's got to stick. Instead, I want to be more like a Navy SEAL or like an Army Ranger. and where you do a lot of reconnaissance, okay? And you've done that reconnaissance and you've done your homework, and you know that one shot is so on point that it's going to hit them between the eyes and say, oh, that's me, right? So the spray and pray approach, can it work? Yeah, it can. But chances are people are going to feel like they're being sold to, they get resistant, right? But if you hit something on the head by doing some research with your email, boom, you can make it short and it's going to get more reaction. It's going to get more responses. Once again, make it personal. I'm a big believer in making the first sentence personal. That can be a good habit. How can I open up this email where this opening sentence only applies to that person? Obviously, LinkedIn's a great way to do that. You don't want to be awkward or overly personal, but you might put in there something you have in common, something you noticed in their profile, something like that. So when the prospect opens up that email and they start reading that first sentence, they're like, it's not just a boilerplate, hey, Joe sales guy over here trying to sell you something. I think you'd be interested. Boom, delete. First sentence, hey, Tom, I noticed you're from Chicago and you moved to South Florida. Yeah. Oh, who's this? Right? Curiosity, and it gets them to the second line or the bullet points, right? So create some curiosity. And then lastly, I say make it easy for them to respond. So give them very clear direction what to do next. Hey, respond to my email and just type in the number 1. That will mean X, right? Or, hey, respond to me and we can set some time up on our calendar. A little harder, but not bad. I happen, and you may have this functionality in Salesforce, I can actually put in meeting times and it can be inserted right into my email. Hey, here are a few times that we can chat, and set up short blocks like 18-minute blocks or odd number blocks, but shorter. And oftentimes it, again, creates some curiosity, and they might even ask you about that. For example, my default times are 25, 50, and 80-minute meetings. I don't go from each end of the call. So you can do that in Salesforce, and Krishna might be able to help us on that functionality. If you don't have that, I also have a link below my name where people can schedule time with me. So take a look at some of those things. But the easier you make it to take the next step, the better. And that way, you're going to hopefully get more traction more quickly. So 3 main areas when you're writing your email. If you slow down and think about these, and my challenge to you is take a look at that lead that you're following up on, and you're going to write an email anyway. Try to apply some of these techniques. Share it with us in the Google form here. And again, I'll be collecting all these ideas and I'll incorporate that into this workbook. This will be a work in progress workbook, and I'll give you access to it online. You can always download that. So number 1, your subject line, don't make it an afterthought. Be thoughtful about it. Make it curious. The WIFM, you've heard that. What's the problem you solve? What's the benefit you provide? Just like above, you want to maybe even bullet point these things. And I think anywhere from 2 to 3 bullet points, again, quick. 4, if it's really between the eyes for that client. But once we go beyond that, it's more of the spray and pray method. So quickly to the point, what do we do? Create some curiosity. And then the ask. What's the next step? Make it easy to do that. So look forward to seeing yours, and we'll collect more of those. And man, the next few weeks, we're going to be loaded with great ideas. I can't wait to see the traction we make. So here's a worksheet for your initial contact using an email. I put an example here, and hopefully it triggers some ideas. I'm sure you can make it a lot better, but the 3 points are in here: the subject line, the ask, the problem benefit statement, creating some interest and curiosity, and then the ask, wrapping it up. So as you can see here, subject line, USB 661.1 compliance. If I see that in the subject line, the chances of that getting open is probably a little bit higher than how are you, or what's going on, or some big long subject line, right? You want to create a subject line that creates enough curiosity, like, I probably should open this up. And if you're sending this to a pharma client, they should have this on their radar. If they don't, well, chances are they probably won't be working there much longer. But you kind of get the gist of there. Be thoughtful about your subject line. Next is your opening line, making it personal. So let me just review this example briefly, and hopefully it triggers some ideas, and then this will motivate you to create an email that you can use, put together in this worksheet and share with us on the Google form. So as you can see here, hi Ann, I see that you worked at Life Sciences for several years and we have a lot of the same people in our network. Hey, when was the last time you spoke with Stephanie Roth? I left Life Sciences last year and joined Transcendia, and we're working on our pharma clients plan for the 661.1 compliance. I'd be happy to jump on a brief call next week to share with you how we're helping our clients like Becton Dickinson and others. At the same time, I'd like to get your advice on what other issues facing pharma companies during the COVID era. How does your schedule look for a 14-minute call next Tuesday or Wednesday? I put some options below and looking forward to hopefully connecting. Best, Frank, Rio, Transcendia. Now, just to uncover a couple things here, very personal line. I've done some research in LinkedIn. I see that we have a common connection. I see that, they were relatively close friends. So this email can only be written to Ann. So when she sees that first thing, that's going to create some curiosity to say, what's next? And now what I'm, if you will, promoting and pitching here is, what is she going to get out of this? She's going to get that, number one, I'm working actively on this compliance project. I'm working with reputable clients and I have ideas. And if she doesn't have this thing buttoned up, there might be some curiosity to say, hey, I'm curious, what are you doing? And I've incorporated enough of that. And then I've had an ask of her, I'd love to get your advice. I like this one as well. People love to give advice. Ask for it, listen, right? So, well, what are your thoughts on this? What's your advice? I'm curious what your opinion is, right? Advice, opinions, etc., recommendations. The other thing is help. People love to give help when you explicitly ask. It's human nature. So here's just an example. Let's take some of the ideas that we just talked about, incorporated, and I'm going to ask you to create one email that you're going to use. It's not extra work. It's the same work you're going to do. I'm just going to ask you to put it in that Google form, cut and paste it from your email, bring it over, and we'll be able to share those and incorporate those into the workbook here. And then another reminder is, when we're doing emails, these are tracked in Salesforce as well. Longer term, we can begin to save some of these templates, and you can, probably have 5 to 6 core templates where you can just quickly insert the template, quickly customize it, right? The template will have the bones of it, but we need to do that customization, tailor to each and every one, not boilerplate, right? This is not an email blast type thing. But in Salesforce, we'll be able to do that. In addition to that is, once we've sent this email, what's our next step? Tell our future self when we're going to do something and what we're going to do and what we're going to touch on. Make it easy on yourself, and this will help us continue to work the funnel. This last couple of pages is a sales job aid that I've used, and I made some adjustments here, but this is some phrasing that I've found helpful to use, whether it's by voice when I'm talking to people on the telephone in person or when I'm writing email. So take a look at this, review it, and my advice would be underline or grab 1 or 2 things from this that you can begin incorporating in your prospecting activities to make it a little bit better. And just look for areas where you may be creating some resistance or slowing things down with the questions you ask, maybe how you ask them. And some of these phrases can help you get more engagement more quickly. So take a look at this. And when we get on our call, would love to hear your feedback and what 1 or 2 phrases you're using here. So the last couple of weeks, we've kind of started on the appetizer of this program. We went to the restaurant, we're a little hungry, and we had a couple of appetizers, and you're stepping back and hopefully you're saying, you know what, this is pretty good, right? You're ready for the main course. Well, today you got, a big chunk of that main course. As we continue on, we're going to be adding some sides to this. We're going to continue to season that main course, but overarching, this is all stuff you're familiar with and and it's all about doing more cuts and fewer loops, right? It's about taking the knowledge we have and slowing down and taking a look at how can we do what we do just a little bit better, a little bit more effectively. So today, we gave you a lot of information, and we're going to ask for some information in return, which is to apply this to that one lead. So, once you've done that to that one lead or prospect, then to share with us how you're applying this in the Google form. This is going to help us continue to build this workbook and also provide you with a resource that you can use beyond today and reference as you continue to prospect and bring in more business. So just as a recap, we talked about lead sources and how we can continue to fill our funnel. We talked about LinkedIn and how that can be a great way to be prospecting both passively and proactively. We talked about qualifying, so we make sure we're investing time in the right leads and prospects and not wasting time on the ones that aren't a good fit for us. We talked about the prospecting template, something that can trick us into that top performing behavior, help us to do a 15-minute task, maybe in 5, because it keeps us focused. Then we talked about the initial contact, doing that in a phone call, a voicemail, an email. And then lastly, we shared with you the document phrases that sell. So using different phrases in your emails or phone or what have you that are going to get your prospects engaged versus kind of putting up those roadblocks. So big day today. Thanks for your attention. And even more so, thanks for all the work you're putting into it. It's going to be worth it, folks. I can feel it already. And so let's just continue on this train. And I look forward to talking to you on our next call.